So now we'd like to call on our next speaker, who is Richard Stirling, who is the CEO at Oxford Insights, UK, who will be speaking about what makes open data good data. Over to you, Richard.
So I'm going to talk to you about three things. I'm going to talk to you about why data matters. I'm going to talk to you about what makes good open data. And I'm going to talk to you about some of the other options there are for sharing data beyond open data. Now, everywhere you go at the moment, it seems like people are talking about AI and how it can transform society. You know, Vladimir Putin famously said that the nation who leads in AI will be the ruler of the world. And there are many studies that show that AI will add huge amounts to the global economy. I've picked one by PwC, but you can pick the study of your choice. They all end up in roughly the same order of magnitude. And yeah, that's the benefits for AI and the economic growth that comes with it are unevenly distributed. This is a map of AI readiness, which is a study that we've done at Oxford Insights, looking at how ready a nation is to be able to harness the benefits for AI for their citizens. And you know, there are some countries which are leading, there are some countries behind. The important thing is that this is a future which is unequally distributed. So the benefits that will come from AI won't flow to everybody in the same way. And if you want to harness them, then you need to have a solid data infrastructure as an enabler. You know, modern AI runs on large-scale data. You know, most countries and industries are only part of the way through that data transformation. Most have a really good story to tell, but then when you poke at it, then the data infrastructure underneath isn't always in the way that the place that people would want. It's held in different places, it's held in different formats. It's not at the scale that you would need to achieve transformation or to train the AIs on top. So, and there are a few platform companies which are really leveraging their global scale to get a head start in AI. Mostly out of the US and China, although there are examples from other countries. As Riyad was mentioning earlier, like open data is a key component in that. Like it's if the data is open, you can start combining it across different sources and start achieving that scale that you need to be able to harness the power for AI. So open data is a key to that infrastructure. And it really works if you publish with purpose. So my number one takeaway for you from my talk would be this sense of like, establish what your purpose is and then publish and build your data infrastructure in a way which enables that purpose to happen. Now, there are three interesting areas in this. I'm going to talk about a couple of them. There's open data, and yeah, that's what this session's about. There are also things like data collectives, data brokers, data trusts, which also enable that data infrastructure to be assembled and harnessed and used within an industry, so that you get that economy of scale without necessarily having to have the global company as a precursor. So it sort of levels the playing field a little bit. So taking the first of those categories, open data, the one that we're here to talk about today. This is a map of the Open Data Charter adopters. So these are the signatories to a set of principles for how open data can be published to maximize the benefit for the citizen. There are 6 principles. They're pretty easy to sign up to, but they also just guide the publication process in a way that's incredibly helpful. You know, your data should be open by default. Like if there is no reason why it cannot be open, you should you should be publishing it openly so other people can take it, use it, reuse it, create value on the back of the data that you have. It should be timely and comprehensive. I mean, the nice example, just to pick up on something that Riyad was saying in the Q&A, like if you have a bus timetable and you publish it once, it's useful at that one time. When you change the bus timetable the following year or another point, then if you haven't updated the data, then it's not really very useful. It tells you where the bus used to go to, rather than where the bus goes to today. So it should be timely. You should be able to have all of the data that you need to support that decision. So going back to that purpose, why does somebody want the data? It should be timely and comprehensive. It should enable people to meet that purpose. It should be accessible. Like it should be in the standards that people need or use for that purpose. So in the case of the bus timetables, there is an international standard for publication, which enables the data to be ingested. There was a question as to whether it's being used. I bet you that Google has already incorporated it into the Google Maps standard because it was published to GTFS. So it's just a simple bolt-on. So when you publish your open data, publish it accessibly in comparables to international standards. That helps with making sure that it's interoperable. So a good question to ask yourself as a publisher of open data is like, what are my data spines? You know, there will always, you know, I think of common ones being things like people, place, and time. Like everything happens to someone, somewhere, at some point in time. So if you have those things within the data sets, then you can start combining them against. There will be other points of combination, and it's good to think about what those are and how reliable how much reliance you can place upon them. So do they contain duplicates, etc. And that if you do these things well, then they help, as you heard, they help with governance and citizen engagement, and they also help with growth and innovation. Now, I've spoken a bit there about some of the principles behind open data publication and what makes good open data publication. I want to bring it back to the purpose. Like good data publication is purposeful and should be guided by the purpose. And the Open Data Charter also has practical open up guides around agriculture, climate change, anti-corruption. They've also just published one on COVID and the data that should be published to, or how one can go about publishing data for COVID response. And that, when you start thinking about the purpose behind publication, then open data doesn't always cover all use cases. It's not a panacea. You know, there will be cases where data will help transform an industry or transform a sector or a particular use case, but you can't publish all of that data openly. It might be controversial. It might be personally disclosive. It might have commercially confidential data in there. And there are other techniques that you can use to still enable the data to be used for innovation and to transform a sector, but without having to make it available to absolutely everybody. One approach is a data trust. This is something that's being looked at by a number of countries at the moment. And the important concept here is that you're creating a trusted intermediary. So both sides of the transaction just need to be able to trust the intermediary. So the data is combined in the data trust, and the data trust then shares it with accredited organizations, which can help create scale across an industry. So the players of the industry don't need to trust each other. They don't need to publish the data openly, but they can trust it. They can trust the intermediary and publish it through that. And the intermediary aggregates the data and then shares it with the industry. To give this a concrete example, we're working on this in a couple of places. Like we've got some examples in healthcare. We've also got an example in agriculture. And I have never, I'd never met an industry which was as distrusting as the agriculture industry in the UK. So farmers didn't trust the processes of their work. They didn't trust each other. Sometimes within the companies that were doing food manufacturing, rival sites didn't trust each other and wouldn't share and collaborate. You know, it's an incredibly low trust industry. However, they have some really big shared challenges. You know, a big challenge in the agriculture industry in the UK is antimicrobial resistance. So they have diseases in livestock which are starting to be resistant to the drugs that treat them. And it's a real collective action problem. Like if you had data from across the whole industry, then you could start doing some really smart things like using AI to target compliance. You can really get some traction, but it requires data at scale and nobody trusts each other. So we're establishing a data trust to enable the data to flow through. So everybody can see how the data trust is set up. You can see the objects, you can see what it's doing, who's taking the decisions. You have industry representatives on the decision-making body, and that just enables the data to flow through. But I want to leave you with as I said, the number one takeaway for me from this talk, which is about publishing with purpose. Like this is, you start with what you're trying to achieve, and then you work back through the how, because you need to create the data infrastructure to support that purpose. Some of that data infrastructure is going to be open, some of it's going to be shared, but you need to think about that data infrastructure and to pull out what the first principle from the Open Data Charter, where possible, you should be opening up that data and being open by default. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard. That was Richard Stirling, CEO at Oxford Insights UK. It was great to hear about data trust. That's not something I'd heard about before, and I think it's a good way to be able to encourage more use of open data. Thank you, Richard.